I'm Jessica Anne Pressler, and you've tuned into Your Traitor Within, a podcast that exposes the brutal truths of healing, self-discovery, and breaking free from relentless patterns of self-sabotage. Welcome back to Your Traitor Within. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Victoria Lynn PonTell, speaker, mentor, and creator of the 7 Keys to Unlocking Your Radiant Beauty. Victoria knows firsthand what it means to battle that traitor within, the self-doubt, the perfectionism, the people-pleasing, and she turned that journey into a powerful pathway for transformation. She now empowers women to silence their inner critic, reclaim their confidence, and step into the radiant self-worth from the inside out. Her message is one I think we all need to hear. Your greatest breakthrough begins the moment you stop betraying yourself and start choosing your radiant truth. Victoria, I want to thank you in advance for your vulnerability in sharing your own Traitor Within story. Welcome.
Thank you, Jessica, and just thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here and just want to say hello to your listeners. And just thank you so much for your work in this area. It's so important to be talking about this. And congratulations on your book coming out pretty soon.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
So I just really like how you put together Traitor Within because I think it captures this invitation to really go within and look at those things that are really causing, us to sabotage our best lives. And so, it's those paths that we can get on that, we might be doing behaviors. But when we look deeper, it's usually attached to these mindsets. And so kind of when I step back and think about that, kind of the way I frame it, and I can't wait to read your book. However, right now, the way I look at it is that there's kind of this setup, and then it kind of goes into this tension about it. And then it kind of moves to this resolution. And so in the setup, it's kind of like really looking back and saying, okay, how did this start? What was around me, when I started kind of thinking this way? Who was I around? How old was I? Did I really have the ability and the maturity to really understand which direction I was heading? And, what influences were there? And sometimes, people don't want to look back and kind of evaluate that because they might be running from that. But I think the opportunity is to kind of look back and say, yeah, what was going there? And, sometimes these things can come in earlier in our life, or they can just come in at new beginnings of our life. At any stage, new beginnings are beginnings. And, sometimes, especially when things, I think, enter into our youth, sometimes when we have kids or we're around youth, it can be a real mirror reflection to say, to have compassion for ourselves, because it can be like, wow, this 15-year-old has no idea either, and it can really help us really get a sense of really what was going on, maybe even for us at that time, and being a little more gentle and compassionate. So I think really not being afraid to look at the setup of where things came. And then, but we know that if this starts, then, it starts heading us down this path. And there becomes this tension, and there's like maybe these whistles and blowers going off in our life, and we're like, oh my gosh, something's wrong, something's not right in my life, and I need to get off of this. But sometimes we don't know how. And even though the road may feel dysfunctional, it's also familiar, and we don't know what that other road might look like anyway. And so even that, we want to get off, but we don't know how. Or we have people around us minimizing it, saying, whatever, you're making a big deal out of nothing, or whatever that is, or we just minimize it ourselves, like, or we have shame or whatever it is that keep us kind of stuck. And so, eventually we come into that third phase, I would say, of a resolution with it. And that's gonna, to me, that either looks like we resolve that oh, well, this is my lot in life. I have to deal with it. And it kind of can fall us into a victim role.
Mm-hmm.
Or we say, no, I need to get out of it. I need to find a better path. This is not well for me. This is creating harm. And getting help, whatever that looks like, and putting people around us that are healthier,
Mm-hmm.
and so I feel like that's kind of the path with these things. And so for me, my traitor within was really about getting and seeking approval from other people and people pleasing. And it
Mm-hmm.
came up with regards to my body
Mm-hmm.
and how I took care of myself, and what I felt that other people wanted my body to look like for their
Mm-hmm.
approval. And so I grew up in actually a Christian home, and was told, don't worry about your body, it's your heart that's most important,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of don't focus on that. So as a kid you're like, yeah, okay, good,
Mm-hmm.
and but when adolescence came, I think we can all relate to this, that the world is shouting at you, like, not only is your body important, but it's going to influence maybe the friends you're going to have,
Mm-hmm.
whether somebody might be interested in you or not,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes opportunities. And so when I got to that stage, it was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't have the tools. Like, I didn't know then, but
Mm-hmm.
when I look back, it's like, yeah, I didn't have the tools back then to handle those kinds of pressures. I didn't know what to do. And so my body was changing, with hormones. And I also probably I needed to change and adjust to my body in terms of what I was eating. I couldn't eat like a kid anymore. My body
Mm-hmm.
was doing different things. And so what happened is my friends and I went on a diet, and I lost weight. I was never really overweight, but just heavier than I felt was comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
And unbeknownst to me, I was heading down a path that was going to be a multi-year journey for me, Jessica, that just really threw me into distortions with food. The distortions that say, you can't eat this, you can't do that. If you eat that, that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have that. And then the the very rigid rules, and then if I did something, then the mental beat up. So kind
Mm-hmm.
of that really, you know, fatiguing kind of situation about food, and just yeah, it was like a daily battle.
Mm-hmm.
And I always was going to start again on Monday, or the first of the month was another start,
Mm-hmm.
but I could never seem to do it perfectly and do it rightly.
Mm-hmm.
But if I did, I mean, if I got one day right, then I was good, right? So, and a friend of these food distortions was exercise distortions, where I put myself on these rigid routines, like so crazy and fatiguing, that again, that would be setting myself up for failure too. And then it just bleeds into other parts of it bled into other parts of my life, like with clothing, wearing oversized sweatshirts or whatever, even though I didn't really need to, and just not, so it just starts permeating in these other aspects of my life, and in relationships with guys, and who I was choosing, and whether they were best for me. But
Mm-hmm.
my insecurities, kind of contributed to that, and so um what ended up happening is I finally, reached out for help.
Mm-hmm.
And because there was a lot of shame in it, and it was a lot of suffering in silence, because again, it wasn't like I lost hope, but it was just, I got to do better. I got to do better, But eventually I sought out help, and I finally found some stability in terms of self discipline, because I wasn't having, that I needed self discipline. In a better way, you know what I mean? And so I finally found that, because I guess I relaxed some of my rules, so I found it more achievable to live with, kind of
So,
thing.
how did you relax your rules? How did you give yourself permission to do so and not, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what happened is the counseling that I was getting and some of the help that I was getting kind of helped me, be a little more flexible with
Hmm.
myself.
Hmm.
But I felt like I got that, which helped life flow better, for
Hmm.
sure. But it wasn't until I was almost 40 where I realized that I still had these kind of rigidities. They were working though. They were working for me because it allowed me to not be so focused on it. And I didn't have as much, I had a pattern of exercise, but it wasn't as crazy.
Hmm.
And but then when I was almost 40, I started deepening my faith walk. And so for me, it was turning back to God because my life was kind of just a mess then. And so I realized that I didn't have to do this alone and this burden wasn't mine. And
Hmm.
so I think regardless of whether your listeners are on a faith walk or not, I think we can all agree that finding that path to more mental quiet and to, finding the path that really reconnects us with our best self is really something to go after.
I
And
agree.
yeah,
And I think community helps.
community is so
Finding good
important.
people,
Oh
for
my
sure,
goodness.
supportive and
Well,
compassionate, non-judgmental, empathetic people that understand what you're going through is really makes a big difference.
it's so big, Jessica, because a lot of these things are suffering in silence. And
Hmm.
sometimes you feel like you're the only one. But when
Hmm.
you start sharing with other people, it's
Right.
like, yeah, I'm experiencing that too. And
Hmm.
I have friends around me. I see ladies, in their 60s, struggling with food and so for me it's like I just want other people to live in the freedom as well because we don't have to live like that. And it's really, one of the things I saw about you is that you work in hospice. And
Hmm.
a couple years ago, I lost my parents passed on. And I think when you're around people in that season of life, it
Hmm.
really is a priority checker.
Hmm.
Kind of like you realize that life on earth is temporary
Hmm.
and it's life becomes too short to go our whole lives in these places where we're, not living in freedom.
Hmm.
And so I think that it's just too big of a cost when we
Hmm.
don't have to be,
And
you know.
when you say living in freedom, I want to just piggyback for a second about the traitor within, because someone once asked me, what is recovery for you? How do you know? And it was when I can just be free to be my authentic self.
Yes.
It's freedom.
Amen. It's so good. It's so
Mhm.
important. And it's really shifting the what should I do for other people to what do I need right now?
Hmm.
And I think we're so ingrained with, love is taking care of other people, and it is. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that it isn't, but that doesn't mean that love doesn't point back to us. Are we treating ourselves kindly? Are we
Hmm.
being gentle? Are we being harsh towards ourselves?
Hmm.
And really evaluating that too, because are we loving ourselves?
Hmm.
Hmm.
No, I agree with you. Everything you've said, it makes
Hmm.
perfect sense. So tell me then, where do you think, you talked a little bit about when you were a teenager, but where do you think the need for perfectionism, the need for where the eating, I don't like the word use disorder comes in, but the
Hmm.
body dysmorphia, all
All
that
that.
came in. What happened in your childhood to, if it was in your childhood or your youth, to get you there? Because you talked about it, a loving Christian home where your heart was very important. So what
Yeah,
happened?
what I think happened is I think that the confusion of what love meant and the confusion of where you fit in the definition of love, the me fits in there, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because when you're taught to esteem others, when you're taught to love others,
Hmm.
it can become confusing if it's not balanced with, but it's not at the expense of losing yourself.
Hmm.
It's not at the expense of you holding appropriate boundaries. It's not at the
Hmm.
expense of you not having a voice about what your needs
Hmm.
are. And that's where I think I went wompy because I
Hmm.
think it was like, okay, what does this person need from me? What does this guy want from me?
Mm.
For me to be, a girlfriend, you know what I mean, or whatever.
Mhm.
And so it was like, really trying to find out from other people what they need rather than owning my identity and who I'm supposed to be first,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And not in a selfish way, but
Right.
in a healthy way to protect myself. Because if I'm not, you know, functioning well within myself, then how am I really going to be functioning well anyway? You know what I mean? And I wasn't.
Exactly. Right. And you can really do both. You can take care of someone
Yes,
else's needs and take care of your own. Not
exactly.
responsible for their needs because they are responsible for their needs,
Exactly.
but you can certainly do both. You can love yourself and take care of yourself and
Hmm.
as well as give to others.
Exactly. That's right. And I think that that's one place I don't know. I mean, I feel especially for women, we need to hear because it's like,
Mhm.
that, sacrificing for others. And yes, I mean, yes, that's not like totally off the table. But again, it's about what is at what expense,
Right. What are you
right?
giving up to do
Hmm.
that?
Yeah.
And if you're giving up yourself, because a lot of time people will enter relationships, for example, or jobs, it doesn't have to just be a
Right.
relationship
Hmm.
where they, and maybe it's for need for perfectionism or, which I will, because I say you can trace to a parent doesn't praise you unless you're perfect. Or whatever it may be traced back to. And then you go to a job and you work, crazy hours and you have no balance in your life. Or you're in a relationship and you are the fixer. So no matter what happens, you are the only person twisting into pretzels in order to make it work
Hmm.
when you can't change the other person. You can
Right.
only, so it's, and then you feel like a failure because the relationship's not working because your identity is that fixer or or the person at work needs to,
Hmm.
if you don't, and so on.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, it's so important. And really healthy boundaries are really, yeah, like you said, not about
Yeah.
changing the other person. It's about protecting yourself from,
Mhm.
for what your needs are in that
Yeah.
moment or the relationship. Hmm. Yeah.
And where do you find yourself today?
Yeah, so today, I think some of the things that help me is like just practically to kind of get to that place, some practical tips, making peace with your younger self, those places where maybe these things did slip in. So
Hmm.
going back to, because your younger self is still part of you. It's still
Hmm.
part of your identity. And it's there, you know what I mean? We're operating in the time of today, but that doesn't mean your inner self isn't still real, and those wounds or whatever came in, or
Hmm.
that shame or whatever is there isn't there. And so I think, making peace with your younger self, like I did an exercise where I went back to 15 years old, and said,
Hmm.
hey, I want to just, connect with you at
Hmm.
15, and I know that might sound weird to people, but
No, I.
it's so helpful because it's like I want you to know that I love you,
Right.
and you know what I mean, and that whatever happened to you is it's okay, we're here, and I'm with
Hmm.
you, and I'm going to protect you now, you know what I mean, and like just making rest, and like you didn't have the understanding then that you
Hmm.
have now, because but people can fall into, what I see is that, I'm 54, right? And
Hmm.
so I have a viewpoint now that is so very, very different than back then.
Hmm.
And so, like, if I try to impose what I know now and say, you should have known that at 15, you know what I mean? Like, no, I didn't know
Hmm.
that at
Right.
15. And so I have to be gentle with the 15-year-old and say, yeah, you didn't know that. And so, you know
Hmm.
what, I understand that happened to you. Or, and 16, you know what, at 16, hey, I want you, I want you to know, you were really persevering, and speaking positive, and like you were 1 year closer to getting your breakthrough. I'm glad you
Hmm.
didn't give up, and then 23, you know what, I know that relationship with that guy was hard, and like, there was pressure put on you, and like I know what you were doing, I know, because people aren't usually making decisions like, oh yeah, I want to go off track in my life. No, we're usually making decisions like in the moment of what
Mm-hmm.
we feel is best. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, again, finding that compassion for ourselves is so important to heal that traitor within.
So I always do talk about that compassion, that the concept of traitor within isn't to blame. It isn't
Mm-hmm.
to, it's to actually an understanding that that part of you, it was there, could still be there, but hopefully not continuing. It was there to help you. It was there to
Mm.
protect you. Its motive was protection. So, but it came with tunnel vision, or it came with misguidance or misuse. So, it's not about blame. It's about, or not about hatred or anything really negative, except that we learn from it,
Mm-hmm.
and we learn to say we don't need it anymore because it's not helpful in our lives.
Right.
And we love you. It's part of who we are. We are a lot of different parts. It's not for us to be defined by it, but it is part of us. And so we could hopefully love it, hopefully forgive, whatever roads it led us down in the past. But to say now we understand. Now we can
Yeah.
take that knowledge and
Yeah.
we could say we don't work that way anymore. That's not helpful.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that. And it's so good. Because yeah, it's part of the process of becoming, and learning about life, I think, and learning, yeah, it's just part of that, of where we are and where how we
Mhm.
go. And yeah, like you said, we learn from it. And we are who we are today, because of our experiences, and would we have learned, I mean, yeah, would I change that knowing now? You know what, maybe, because now I'm here, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And so I think being okay with it, being
Mhm.
okay with it, and it's the kind of the knocks of life that can come, and just that, but the journey, but the celebration of, there's someone who's there's not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not where I was,
Mhm.
kind of. And so we're in this journey of life, learning maybe to be compassionate for others, but compassionate for ourselves too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I know that it could be hard for some. It's hard for me sometimes to not, and I don't believe this is to be true, but to not look at um, taking care of yourself as being selfish, because it's not selfish. It makes you better at what you do for others because of how you take
Mm-hmm.
care of yourself. If you can look at it that way, it's easier for me. But it's something that I have to fight with sometimes within myself,
Mm-hmm.
that to take that time, you know,
Yeah.
little messages that we have either from our childhood or from society. You have to be able to say, wait a second. And it's interesting. I mentor, or I supervise an MSW student. And one
Mm,
of the things that I noticed in school, and then I went to school almost 40 years ago, so it's very different. Now, part of the curriculum is self-care.
mm. So
And
good.
I find that I'm very happy about that. And I find that so interesting. That's literally part of the curriculum. That I have to talk to her every time we meet about what did you do to take care of yourself this week? And it's with the idea that for her to be a good social worker, for her to be able to give what she needs to give every day as a social worker,
Hmm.
she must take care of herself. It's for her and her needs, and then for her to be the best at what she does.
Yeah, that is so good. Yeah. I think yeah, that connection with self is
Mm-hmm.
really important, that awareness as we go. And that's so great in the connection with social workers. And I'm in nursing, and just the same, it's so important because, especially like in those professions, like you're seeing a lot of things, and that
Mm-hmm.
stuff can kind of land on you. And it's like, how do you process? How are you taking care of you? Because especially in a lot of jobs, where there's a lot of pouring out and giving out. And so how can you be continually filled up for yourself? So
Mm-hmm.
that is awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know with nursing, I have many friends who are nurses. I work with nurses. It's a very high stressed, emotional, physically grueling
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
And yeah. Do you feel that in the nursing, that there is also an idea of self-care? Because I don't get that always, the impression that.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, I
Mhm.
think nursing school is very intense. So I've been in nursing education.
Ah,
And
okay.
so, it's a very intense environment. And part of it is cultivating kind of that character, I believe, because it's like you have to be ready for, physically, emotionally, spiritually, the whole gamut of situations. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of like grooming of students in that way to understand, and the discipline, like,
Mm-hmm.
being on time, and like, you've got to, there's certain things that attention to detail has to be cultivated so
Mm-hmm.
that students, because with medicine and things like that. And so it can be really pretty intense. So I do think, but obviously we want to be modeling caring as well, because,
Mm-hmm.
and caring and compassion. And so that is often done, but it's mostly directed towards patient care. So I
Yeah.
think that's an area to be mindful about,
Mm-hmm.
for nurses, just for, like you said, the self-care. That's beautiful.
Can you introduce that into the curriculum that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's something to definitely think about. I mean, I used to, one of my positions was an academic retention specialist. And so my job, I loved that job, because what I did is I like would meet with students and how are you? How are you doing? And just help them balance, the stress of school with life, because some of the students were single moms coming back to school, and they
Mm-hmm.
were putting everything on the table to be at school. And
Mm-hmm.
so we would encourage them, and just be a landing place, where they could come in and vent, or just help them
Mm-hmm.
strategize and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
there are interventions like that. But yeah, no, I think something to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do
Yeah.
you feel that your traitor within now is not around you, or do you still get triggered and then you have to deal with it?
It's interesting, because I think it's like if you break a chair and it's
Mm-hmm.
broken and you glue it back together,
Mm-hmm.
it's back together, but it's a little weaker than maybe the other parts of the chair, right? And so I still recognize that I have to be mindful, right? I have to watch out for vulnerabilities. I have to, watch what my thoughts are. If thoughts are coming in that are trying to confuse me, then I just have to, replace those thoughts and get back into my renewed mind about it. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, I think the opportunity is to move the traitor within to the friend within. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think my daily journey is like. Okay, how are you loving yourself today, Victoria? Like, are you being kind to yourself? Are you being
Mm-hmm.
gentle, patient? Are you
Mm-hmm.
giving your body what it need? Are you being sensitive to the needs of your body? Or are you just, you know, um, kind of ignoring the kind of things? And so I think that it's honestly a daily journey, but definitely I live in a freedom that I had not known. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your story. I think that people will definitely be able to relate to your story. And I think what you've said is very helpful. And I love the chair analysis at the chair. I can visualize it and it makes perfect sense to the trader.
Yeah.
How did your book come about?
Yeah, so the book was something that I had been writing kind of in my mind. I go on morning walks, and so
Hmm.
whenever you have that time kind of alone and quiet. So
Hmm.
I'd been kind of thinking about it and writing, and it's been on my heart. And what happened is, I think when my parents passed on, I wanted to write down for my daughter, who's 25,
Hmm.
just some wisdom about her body, just things that I had gone through. And I wanted her to have a renewed mind about things, because we know, like, social media and just how sex is viewed, and how, just the issues about our body, right, that can create
Hmm.
harm. So I wanted to write it down for her in the event that, something happens to me. I wanted to leave behind something for her to
Hmm.
read, to protect herself in her
Hmm.
life. And when I was writing it, though, I felt like, there's probably other women that maybe could benefit.
Hmm.
And I mean, research shows that 79% of women are dissatisfied with some part of their body, and that's probably a low,
I think
low
it's probably
count.
low. Hmm.
And so anyway, so that's why I went ahead and published it, and put it out there to see,
Hmm.
if it could help anybody, then that's worth it. So that's kind of how it came to be. So now I got on social media, which was a little hard for me, because I'm more private. So it's been
Hmm.
kind of stretching me, but but I realized that, getting out there to be able to share the message and speak, if it could help other people, then that's what I want to do. So
It's
I didn't need to
beautiful.
get over myself about that.
No, and I've struggled with it too. But I know that social media is a very, one of the best ways of reaching people.
Hmm.
And if your
Yeah.
intention went from giving it to your daughter to now giving it to a broader audience, it is the way to go. And I commend you because it's hard to do. It sounds like it's hard for you to do. With time, it should get easier,
I
but
hope so.
but it is hard. And
Yeah.
coming on here is amazing, and I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you
So,
so
is
much.
there anything else you want to share about the concept or about what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I would just encourage people to really, consider, how am I treating myself, and really kind of really think about that. Like, do I, um, am I loving myself? And
Mhm,
if not, why? And kind
mhm,
of not being afraid to go within. And that's why I love you had put traitor within, because it's
mhm,
not being afraid to go within yourself, because you are you, and like going, like really go, nobody knows you better than
mhm,
you, and what happened for you, and that was real. And so
mhm,
really not being afraid, not running from that. Sometimes the only way through is through. And
mhm,
so I would just encourage your listeners to not be afraid and to go into that, so that you can look at it head on, and then
mhm,
dispel the lies, and
mhm,
come into the truth, and then walk out, into this new place. And so, yeah, and again, I just would encourage people that, yeah, that you don't have to stay there, like you're telling people, Jessica, like
mhm,
you can move into that new place and
mhm,
find that friendship with yourself, and to
mhm.
take care of yourself and love yourself. So, yeah, I just thank you so much, Jessica, for this opportunity. And I've watched your reels and podcasts, and I just really appreciate how you're speaking out on some difficult subjects.
Mhm.
But yet it's so important, because again, I think so many people may be struggling in silence. And so having people like you out there sharing and being authentic and honest, it's really beautiful. So thank you.
And thank you too, because what makes this podcast so wonderful is that everyone is doing that. You're doing that today too by telling your story, your authentic
Mhm.
story, and people are going to learn through your story, as each episode is a different person's story. Because people realize they're not alone. It would help people recognize that they may have a traitor and how they're going to figure the traitor out and then what to do. It takes away shame when people
Yeah.
realize they're not alone. So it's huge. And so I really thank you for your vulnerability and your explanation and your insight. I think that because it could be scary for someone to look into their childhood or to their youth to figure out where it starts. But I want to reassure people out there too, this is not about blame.
Mm-mm.
This is about making your life healthier. And you don't have to do it alone. You can absolutely go to therapy. You don't have to do this on your own. I even have a book out that's a journal that helps you figure out your traitor and figure out and how to heal. But I recommend that people do it with a therapist
Mm-hmm.
because going back can be scary.
Hmm. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
I agree. And not all people are the same. All people are great, but some people
Hmm.
are more healthy. And so
Hmm.
especially when we're in that process of healing, it's really important to put healthy people around us that can really help us
Hmm.
see things in the right way.
And then to choose those people,
Hmm.
including a therapist. Not all therapists will be helpful for you.
Absolutely.
So it's also knowing that if it doesn't feel right to move
Hmm.
on,
Absolutely.
to try to
Hmm.
find someone who works with whatever is going on in that person's life.
Hmm. Yeah.
Anything you want to add before we close?
Yeah. Just thank you again for this time, and your work. So yeah.
And thank you for your insight, your time for coming on, sharing your story, for the work that you're doing for the book, which is available on Amazon, I saw.
Correct. Hmm.
Any other places that you know, or
Barnes and Noble.
and Barnes and Noble.
Hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you're interested in learning more about Your Traitor Within, grab the journal. Visit www.jessicaannpressler.com for more.